Hello, I'm here at the Center of Photographic Art in Carmel. They have a new exhibition, Reimagine Landscapes, and I thought we could go in and have a virtual tour and talk with the curator, Ann Jastrab. Okay, let's go in.
Hi, I guess I'm going to take this mask off. My name is Ann Jastrab. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Photographic Art in Carmel. So the Center for Photographic Art was started in 1987 here in downtown Carmel. And so this was the original space of the Friends of Photography, which was started by Ansel Adams and Wynne Bullock and Cole Weston in 1967. So we moved into this historic photography gallery space. And we're keeping the traditions of landscape photography alive, but then we're also doing new and innovative things with emerging and contemporary artists. So the show that's on the walls right now actually is the Reimagine Landscapes show. And it's 8 female photographers who are all working with constructed or recreated landscapes. None of them are straight photography like the traditions of F64 or Ansel Adams. So the reason why this show is all female photographers is that it is August 2020 is the 100th anniversary of women in America getting the right to vote. It's the 100th anniversary of the ratification of the 19th Amendment. So we wanted to have a show to honor women, and so this is it. So these pictures are by an artist named Ann Mitchell, and I met her in Portland at Photolucida. There's a portfolio review there, and when she sat down, I saw that she had these platinum prints, and I'm actually a platinum printer, so I was very interested in this work. And each of these pictures, I noticed they're all landscapes, but there was something that seemed really surreal about them. And then we talked about it, and she actually is photographing all the different elements in these photographs and then putting them together in Photoshop to create these totally invented landscapes. So it's kind of an amazing combination of using new technology and old technology, where she's using Photoshop to make these negatives, but then using a historical process, platinum printing from the 1860s, to make the prints. So in this photograph here, Ann's photographed this building and then also this landscape, but these two things existed separately, and she put them together in one negative so that this kind of incredible facade of a building is sitting in the middle of vacant fields. This work is by Mercedes Dormy, and her work is actually a collaboration with the landscape. And she's Native American, and she's a member of the Tongva Angelino tribe down in Los Angeles. And her tribe actually isn't recognized by the federal government, so there's a lot of challenges there. She's actually giving a talk, an artist talk, online at CPA on August 20th, which should be really informative, talking about the way she works with the landscape. So in these images, she actually goes in and she takes materials from her tribe and her history, and then she weaves them into the landscape. So this image, actually all of her work is titled both in her native tongue and in English. So this picture is called The House of Spiderwebs, but it's also, and I'll never pronounce this correctly, called Iokin Riichi, and she's working in these shells and things from her tribe. So she's working a lot in terms of thinking about the constructed landscape, because this shows a lot of constructed landscape. She's actually making construction in the landscape and then photographing it. So she actually shoots medium format film and a medium format film camera. This other photograph, I think you can probably see both of these, but this is called To the Land of the Dead, Shishionga. And here she's using cinnamon, which was one of the materials that is repeating a lot in her different photographs. So yeah, this is a picture that sometimes upsets people because of that strange hole, spider web. But definitely tune in on August 20th if you can to hear her talk about her work. She's much more articulate than me. So these photographs are by Charlotta Maria Hochstötter, and she's actually from Iceland, and where she is right now. So she actually flew in, delivered these pieces, and then flew back to Reykjavik. But her work is called topography studies. So you can notice how they're sort of cut like topographic maps. But she actually uses she initially started making these pieces. They were very small, and then you know, they've obviously gotten a lot bigger. These are over 6 feet tall, and she initially was cutting them with scissors, but then she started using an X-Acto knife to cut them. So they're very deep. They have a depth to them, and just in terms of thinking of a different way to photograph her landscape, like most of her work, she's taking photographs of her native Iceland and then going back and reworking them with these layers. So they're really tactile, they're really interesting. So this image is actually a fingerprint. It's from a different series of hers called Impressions. And so this is actually her thumbprint, and she has one photograph that she's used with the, again, cutting with an X-Acto knife to get the impression of her thumbprint, and then other landscapes behind it coming through. So this is Vanessa Marsh's work, and she, actually I've known her for many years. I was the gallery director at Reiko Photo Center in San Francisco, and she was one of our artists in residence. And all of these prints, I mean, they're titled for places like, this is the Olympic Peninsula, there's the Grand Tetons, there's other references to different national parks. But they're all made, so these are all lumen prints, which is an interesting process because it's actually a silver gelatin print, and mostly when you think of silver gelatin prints, you don't think of things this color. But what she does is she actually, and she was doing this as a resident too, that's how I know how these were made, but she actually makes a cut paper negative, because this is a photogram essentially. And so she, with a photogram, you know, you put an object on a piece of paper and expose it to the sun or to enlarger, and you get this outline of the object. So she actually makes cut paper mountains in different geographical forms, geological forms, and then exposes them outside in the sun. And the way she's getting the tones in these is she uses different expired silver gelatin papers, but then the key, she says, to getting these different colors, because maybe you saw some are more pink, some are more yellow, some are purple, it's the fixer she uses. She develops them with expired fixer, so that's actually toning them. But they're really quite beautiful. So we got this whole mountain range in here that we can experience. So this work is by Georgina Rascala, and actually the name of the show, Reimagine Landscapes, I took from her body of work, which this work is called Reimagine Landscapes. And these particular prints, she uses different materials. These prints are on newsprint, actually, and they're all one of a kind, and she cuts these photographs and folds the paper into different shapes. She also prints on canvas and then folds the prints into different forms. She's originally from Mexico City and now lives in Los Angeles and is an artist there and a teacher. So this work is by D.M. Whitman. Her name is Dina Whitman. She lives in Maine. She's an artist there. And these are all historical process prints. They're all salted paper negatives, and then she paints them with a gouache that she tints. That's where the red color's coming from. And they're actually historical negatives of icebergs, and she enlarges them and makes this contact print. And I actually saw these pictures there was a portfolio viewing in Portland at Photo Lucida, again, the same time I met Ann Mitchell, actually. And I didn't have Dina as a reviewee. We didn't sit across from a table with each other and look at work, but I was in this massive portfolio review where there were hundreds of people, or portfolio walkthrough, and I saw her red icebergs that were kind of standing out in this crowd, and I could see them from across the room, and I just went over and I was like, these are amazing. And I took her card, and then when I finally put this show together, which now is almost 3 years since I met her, I had to have these in the show as these kind of reimagined, reconfigured landscapes. And this is Liz Hickok's work. She actually is a working artist in San Francisco, and I met her years ago. I did a studio visit with her, and at the time, you may have seen these pictures. She was doing this series called Jello San Francisco, where she was actually making molds and then making all the buildings of San Francisco, like the Transamerica building and the Palace of Fine Arts, and making them out of Jello and putting them in these different scenes and then lighting them, and they're all different colored buildings, and they look like they were moving and shaking because Jello, of course, is not such a stiff substrate. But people ended up loving those, and this was the project that came after that, where she started building these miniature cities. So these are all like little tiny structures. You know, they're not like these telephone poles are, you know, they're like this tall. And then here's this giant print of them. And then these buildings are these, you know, tiny little structures just making out of wire, I don't know, what little pieces of metal. And so then what she does is she gets these chemicals in crystal kits, and she floods the scenes that she builds, and then these crystals grow. And she actually has a couple videos that you can watch on her website of these things growing, and like she'll make miniature trees and then the crystals grow. So they kind of feel very apocalyptic, but they're completely fake. Like these are entirely fake landscapes that she's constructed herself in these little sets. So it's a really interesting artist practice. Especially, she also makes a lot of videos of them now, where they're these large projections where you can see, I don't know, they feel like the apocalypse, but they're also really beautiful. So there's an interesting dichotomy there. So these are Krista Blackwood's photographs, and these are all hand-pulled photogravures, which is another historical process. So what this whole series is called the Red Dot series, and there's actually 8 photogravures in that series, plus a 9th print. And the red dot is symbolic of like a nude female figure in the landscape, but the figure isn't there, the figure's missing. So the red dot is sort of symbolic of a woman. So if you could see the whole series, and we just have a small selection, then we have 4 of those photogravures in the show. The 9th picture is actually a large circular image of a naked female form printed in red in a circle. And it's broken up into pieces, so it's kind of the culminating piece of the series. But since we're doing mostly the landscapes, it's a landscape show, we didn't include the entire series. But these are some really fantastic photogravures that have been included in a lot of museum shows. I feel we're really lucky to have them here, because they're also almost sold out. So come see them, they're really beautiful in person.